Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Probably time keep me.
25.
Yeah, 20 minutes. Tell me to stop.
Questions after that.
Yes, we'll have questions after.
22.
Yeah, if that's okay. You can go on for a while. I need to be told to stop. Okay. So we started our discussions on Bhagavad Gita a few weeks ago with Jai Sachinandan Prabhu, and he discussed the first verse and the lead up to Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita may appear to be an episode in the Mahabharata, but it's actually the reason for the Mahabharata. So it was presented in such a wonderful way by Srila Vyasadeva, because he wants us to get to the heart of what this life is about, doing our duty for God. And the whole Bhagavad Gita is how to do that, how to do your duty for Krishna. But how to present that in an interesting way to people who don't really, like reading about these subject matters. So we may find it even more unusual in this day and age because hardly anyone actually reads even literatures like Mahabharata. But in those days, people actually did. That was the entertainment. That was the thing, right? Like Prabhupada described, even up to his childhood, and still now I'm sure in the villages, people get together, they come under like a tree or some central place and they hear the scripture. And then, they go to sleep. Like, that's their evening entertainment. Right? That's actually what cultured people do, right? So they hear from the epics, they hear from scripture. So these histories, and we use that word, I use that word a lot, because I don't like the word mythology. It's come a lot into our lingo, even people who follow Hindu religion talk about mythology, but it's not mythology, right? I mean, I don't know if there's an element of history to like Greek mythology, for example, but it's not the same. Right? It's not like something that's sort of based on historical facts, but then there's a whole lot of interpolations. Like what we read in the Mahabharata, what Srila Vyasadeva gave us, it's fact, it's history, it happened, right? And therefore, it wasn't just written by anybody, not like the people at the time or anybody, but God Himself. Vyasadeva is an incarnation of Krishna. God Himself wrote it. You can trust it. It's real. It happened. And you can trust all the teachings of it as well. So we don't call it mythology and we don't call it stories or anything like that, right? It's history. Okay. So he recorded these things so that, when the people would get together in the evenings and they'd hear the Mahabharata, they'd hear the Bhagavad Gita as well. They'd hear the philosophy. Because as people became less and less into philosophy and more into events and things and people, at least if you were reading about spiritual events and spiritual people, then the message could come through. So that's Srila Vyasadeva. He was Tri Kala Gya. Tri, even in Sanskrit, means three. Kala is time, and Gya is knower. So he's knower of three phases of time, past, present, and future. So he could see that we weren't going to be really interested in hearing too much philosophy. So he parceled the Bhagavad Gita as appearing again like an episode in the Mahabharata, but it's actually the reason for the Mahabharata. Right? It's a way to convey the essential teachings of Dharma for everybody. And we can see this from the fact that it is the most popular of all the Hindu literatures, all across the world. And people have been reading Bhagavad Gita in many countries and many languages, even before Srila Prabhupada brought out Bhagavad Gita as it is. But now we have the authorized presentation, of Bhagavad Gita, so that we can understand exactly what Krishna wanted us to know from it. Right? Because the problem is, if it comes from another author, then it's what they wanted us to know, and not what Krishna wants us to know. So we're reading from text 2 onwards today, because we're going to go sequentially as much as we can with all our speakers, even in future. And we said we'll cover a few verses because these have very short purports and some have no purports. And we'll just read, for the sake of time, we'll just read the Sanskrit and the translation and some of the purport. So text 2. Sanjaya Vacha Drishtva tu pandupanikam vyudhang duryodanastada acharyan upasangam ya raja vachanam abravit. And the translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Sanjaya said, O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhan went to his teacher and spoke the following words. So we remember from the first verse that Sanjaya is relating this history to his master, the king Dhritarashtra. So it's like a story within a story, or a history within a history. So what's happening between Krishna and Arjuna is within the history of what Sanjaya is telling Dhritarashtra. And just like Vyasadeva, he's telling Dhritarashtra things as it is. Not he's seeing one thing and he's saying something else. And that's how again we know that we can trust whatever's being said here, because as he's seeing it, he's explaining it to this blind king. So the importance here is that the point that Srila Prabhupada starts off with is that actually Sanjaya was a student of Vyasa. I just wanted to check that. Therefore, he is most qualified to present what his spiritual master is going to present to us. So the point that Srila Prabhupada starts off by making is that Dhritarashtra was blind by birth. Right? And we have no discrimination for anyone who has no ability. But the problem is that he was spiritually blind, and that is the issue. He couldn't see right from wrong in the spiritual sense. And even though his sons were so evil and they were constantly conniving against their very good, very kind, very peaceful 5 cousins, he indulged them. He allowed this to go on. And him as a king, he was supposed to embody Dharma. He's supposed to embody, the king is supposed to embody it. Right? He's supposed to be the representative of God on earth. At least in those days it was acceptable. So for him to behave like this was completely unacceptable. But it went on because just like, politics, sometimes it just goes on. Just the right people, the ones who are supposed to stand up and say something, don't. Right? So others like Bhishma and Drona, who are all teachers and powerful and important spiritual personalities, they all kept quiet. Right? And this is why they were all also destroyed in this battle. They were good people, but they kept quiet. Right? And that's also a lesson for us. We call out things that are against Dharma and against the Supreme Lord when we see it. As devotees, they knew better, but they didn't actually stand up for that, for Krishna actually even. So Prabhupada also goes on to say that Dhritarashtra had some doubts about this battle, because the battle was being fought on a place in the first verse that's called Dharma Kshetra. Kshetra is field and Dharma is of religion. Now you have all his irreligious sons on the field of religion. It's going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect. But the thing about the land of Bharat in particular, India, is that everywhere is sacred. Right? Many places have been lost over time, but everywhere is sacred. So wherever they were going to fight this battle, the guys were going to have the Kauravas, the blind king's sons. The odds were going to be against them, which actually is a sign of the larger picture that they were against God. So wherever they were going to be, wherever this battle was going to be fought, they were literally on the opposite side of God. Right? Literally, you can't get more literal than that. So although Dhritarashtra had his doubts, Sanjaya was trying to make him feel better. Right? Because Sanjaya is also a spiritual person. He's a disciple of Vyasadeva. So he knows his master is wrong. But he's different from Bhishma. Right? He's different from Drona. Bhishma and Drona were on the level where they could correct Dhritarashtra. Bhishma was a senior to Dhritarashtra. Drona was a teacher. So they could have corrected Dhritarashtra. Sanjaya is different. He's an employee. He's only the secretary of Dhritarashtra. So even though he knows right, it's not his place. Right? He's just supposed to do, this is his dharma, just do what he's told. There we go. So that's what he's doing here. He's just relaying things. But as a devotee, he's going to make his point heard at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. He's going to tell Dhritarashtra that your sons are going to lose. Right? This is from what I've heard, right? From the whole Bhagavad Gita. But he's still, as a loyal secretary, he was very loyal. He's trying to make his master feel good. So he calls the king, he refers to him as king, Raja, even though he's not, shouldn't be the king. Right? He's taken this throne from the 5 brothers. Right? So he shouldn't be the king, but he still calls him Raja. And on top of that, he calls Duryodhan king as well. Raja Vachanam Abravit. Raja, the king, spoke these words. Vachana, you all know Vacha, speak, right? Abravit, these words. So it means he's saying that Duryodhan, the king, went to speak these words to his teacher. Right? So it's making Dhritarashtra feel a little good, like, my son will be king. That's what he wants. That's what this whole battle is for. Right? So he's trying to reassure him that, you're worried about this, the impact of this field, but, your son could still be king. But at the same time, there's a hidden meaning in that sentence. He's looking over the army and he went to his teacher and spoke these words. He is not happy seeing that army because he didn't expect the Pandavas to assemble an army of that size. So in Sanskrit it's very subtle, but there is a lot of the time many meanings within meanings within meanings. So he is saying that it's not that he just kind of casually looked over the army of Pandavas and was like, okay, I got this. He saw it and he got scared. Because you must remember now, the Kauravas, they're ruling the kingdom of the world. That's actually the throne that they're fighting over is the rulership of the world, right? When every country, all of these dvipas, these 7 islands, right, 7 continents, were all ruled by one authority sitting in Hastinapur. Right? That was what they're fighting for, big stakes. So, being in charge of the world for a long time, right, under his corrupt father, he had assembled quite a decent military force. He didn't expect that the Pandavas, who had basically spent most of the last 50 years before that living in exile or in the forest or whatever, were going to be able to assemble an army. Where were they going to get it from? On top of the fact that you expect that most people were going to ally with Hastinapur, right? We're going to ally with whoever's in charge currently. Right? They're not going to go against them, especially not for a bunch of 5 guys in the forest with their mother and their wife. Okay? But by the mercy of the Lord, by the arrangement of the Lord, they assembled a military force that was not exactly equivalent, but was strong enough to challenge Duryodhan. So it's called an Akshahini. It's a military division. And a certain division that's made up of a certain number of cavalry and infantry and whatever, right? So Duryodhan had assembled 11, and the Pandavas got 7. So although it's not like as much, but it's decent. Right? So seeing that made him nervous. So he went to speak to his teacher. So it's sort of like running to the authority. So there is a meaning within that you know what? He's calling him king, but he's like, he's not acting like a king. He's going to his teacher to complain, basically, or to have his doubts answered, or to be put to some peace because he's not happy after what he saw. Yeah. So there's a lot going on in this verse. So Duryodhan, it's also saying a lot about Duryodhan himself. He wasn't capable of doing anything on his own. Right? He needed his backstops all the time. That's why he got to where he was, right? His father, daddy was always there. All the big men were on his side, right? He had 99 other brothers, right? So if one gets sick, so you get it. He had everything, and he had friends like Karna, and these were guys who were not considering dharma when they did anything. They weren't like, okay, is this actually the right thing to do? They were just blindly standing with him. So he always had, somebody who would like reassure him or help him out do the wrong thing. So here he is, the same thing is happening. He sees this force and he's not standing by himself to like, okay, I can take this. He's running to the teacher. And he's going to say something not so nice to him, right, in the next verse. And the next verse is just typical to his nature. So let's go on to verse 3. Pashetang panduputranam acharya mahatim chamum vyudham drupada putrena tava shishena dhimata. And the translation is, O my teacher, this is Duryodhan speaking, right? Duryodhan. O my teacher, behold, the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. So many meanings in this verse as well. So what he's trying to say is, look at that army. Aren't you scared as me? Right? This was not supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to pitch up with the force, right? And then he's saying, so expertly arranged. It's a backhanded insult. Because he's saying it's expertly arranged, but he's saying it's by your disciple. You taught this guy to do this. And he specifically doesn't call the disciple by his name. He invokes the name of the disciple's father, Drupad. He's doing this for a reason. He's bringing in two enemies instead of one. Right? Double blow. Because not only has the disciple acted against his teacher, but the disciple is the son of Drupad, and Drupad is an enemy of Drona. He's doing this both to insult his teacher, but also to incite him to fight, right? Because your enemy's son has done this. Your enemy is on that side. Okay, so then Prabhupada explains a little about this history in the purport, that Dronacharya went to school, right, with Drupad, like we were discussing. The kings and the brahmanas went to school, right, with the ashram in the forest with the teacher. Okay, so that means that the brahmanas and the kshatriyas, the princes, they were schooled together. Right? So, and in the school they were the same. No one was king and no one was Brahmin. But after school, they assumed their duties. So during that time, Drupad and Drona were very good friends. Right? Brahmin and king were good friends. But afterwards, they went into completely different destinies. Drupad became a king, and Drona was a poor Brahmin. So Drona was very poor. Right, to the point where he didn't even have milk for his son. And it got to the point where his wife was like, you need to do something. So he thought about his friend. He had they collect alms, but it just wasn't enough. So he went to his friend Drupad, the king, and he's like, once we were friends, we were equals. But Drupad didn't acknowledge that. He actually insulted him. We can't be equals. That, it's not the same situation now. So Drona was so insulted by this behavior that he trained in his military art to the point where he became the best. And then he raised an army of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. He trained them. He trained these boys. And in particular, his favorite pupil was Arjuna. And we're coming to that now. So it was easy for Arjuna to capture Drupad, right? Even though Arjuna was very young then. Because that's what Drona wanted. He wanted to make Drupad his equal. So he captured him, and he didn't take the whole kingdom, which is now in his hands, right? Technically, because if you win something, it's yours. So Drona the Brahmin has now won the kingdom of Drupad because his students have gone and captured him. But he told him, I'm only taking half, so we will be equals. So he's done something against his dharma. As a Brahmin, he's not supposed to do things like that. Right? So we see that there have been many transgressions of dharma by these personalities. Hence, the battle writes it all in the end. They're all eventually, they pay for it with their lives. Right? But the point is that now you can imagine Drupad, he's burning with revenge. Right? So he's not strong enough to go and counter, not Drona, Arjuna. Arjuna's on another level. Right? So he has to get some celestial help. So he arranges that he gets a son, right, through yagya, through sacrifice, because they were that powerful those days, they could do it. He arranges that he gets a son that would be powerful enough to kill Drona. That means, of course, that he would be able to overcome all the others. Now, how is that going to happen? We'll see. So he gets the son, right? The son actually comes out of the fire, because the fire sacrifice was successful. So he gets the son. And then from the altar comes a twin girl. So the girl is going to be part of this, because it says that she was born actually for this purpose of destroying these kings as well. The girl marries Arjuna, so Arjuna can't fight against Drupad and Drishtadyumna. And the son, Drishtadyumna, then is free to kill Drona. This is how destiny works. Whatever you do will catch up to you. Right? So, what does Drona do? He can't one-up the situation again. Right? At least it stopped there. He did the chivalrous thing. He trained that boy who was going to kill him. That's what they did in those days. That was their character. And he didn't train him like, I'll tell him some things, I won't tell him other things. Right? He trained him perfectly with everything, because this is how his honor has survived to this day. 5,000 years later, we're reading about these people. They were not ordinary. So in that way, at least, although he would die, but he would die so honorably. And he died honorably. So he trained Drishtadyumna. He trained him. And so whatever he has learned, whatever Drishtadyumna has learned, he's now putting to use on this battle. So Duryodhana is not like Drona. He doesn't have any scruples. He would never have trained his enemy's son. So it's almost like he's telling Drupad, look at you. You train your enemy's son and now he's using it against you. You better fight hard against these people. Right? This is no way to be, because why is Duryodhana afraid that Drona will be weak? I gave you the answer already. Who was his favorite pupil? And he's fighting on the other side. So Duryodhana's afraid of that. Because those days the pupils were not just pupils. They were like your children. You loved them. They were very, very dear to you. So now Drona's against, and that's why Arjuna's having a problem fighting against his teacher, because his teacher's like his father. Right? It's not just like our school teachers where you just can't wait to get rid of them, kind of thing, with all due respect to any teachers. But these are different. So he does not want Drona to be weak, right? Have some affection for this Arjuna and not fight hard. He needs him to fight at his best. So he wants to bring out the fact that, your enemies, these people are your enemy. Wipe out favorite and fond of and whatever, enemy, right? This is the games that Duryodhana plays, right? And then in text 4, he says, Atra shura maheshva asa bhimajuna samayudhi yuyudhano viratasya drupadasya maharataha. And the translation is, here in this army, so he's talking about the army of his enemies, are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna, great fighters like Yuyudhana, Virata, and Drupad. So now he's invoking the names of other people to try and stir up Dronacharya. Right? He says that it's not just Bhima and Arjuna I'm worried about. Actually, Bhima is more of a threat to Duryodhana than Arjuna, because Bhima was so angry at what Duryodhana allowed to happen, or actually he commanded it to happen. So it's going a little bit back here. When the 100 sons, they tried many ways to get the Pandavas away from the kingdom so that they could carry on ruling. And one of them was the gambling match. How many of you know about the gambling match?
The dice game.
Mm-hmm. Dice game, yeah. Okay, so I'll just do a quick catch up for everyone else. How are we for time, Paul?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. So this dice game was rigged, right? So you might be wondering now, how come these guys are playing dice? So for kings, for rulers, they're allowed to do two things that ordinary people can't do, Srila Prabhupada says. They can hunt and they can play dice. Okay, so don't get any ideas. We don't hunt and we don't play dice. Well, we actually, some of us are Kshatriyas here, but we're modern day ones. We're all Shudras, so we're not allowed to do those things, okay? So hunt and play dice, right? Obviously the hunting is because they need to hone their skills. They weren't the kind of commanders that sit in the boardroom and plan things and then the youngsters go out and fight like what happens in this day and age. In those days, Prabhupada explains, they led the charge. Right? They fought from the front. So their army, their strategy was as strong as they were. So they needed to be trained very well, which is why Dronacharya, the best military teacher, was teaching the sons of the future kings of the world. Right? Or sons that would be the future kings of the world. So they were allowed to fight, they fought animals, but then the amazing thing was, because they were doing it all by dharma, when they kill those animals, like if you and I kill an animal, it has to come back and finish that birth. its evolution is only guaranteed if it dies a natural death. Then it gets evolved to the level of a human, because the progression from mammal is human, right, after their death. It's a natural progression for animals because they have no karma. When they come to the human life, then they have karma. Otherwise, wherever they fall, they'll just keep coming up until they reach. So they come from insect to reptile, bird, like that. They keep moving up, right? That's where the real evolution is, not the other one. The animal actually, as I remember, it either gets a celestial birth or a human birth, and it gets a royal funeral. So if he killed a tiger, for example, they were noted tiger hunters. They got royal funerals. So it was very different, very, very different times. Right? It wasn't like how the poor animal is insulted now, like a trophy and pictures are taken and stuff like that. It's not like that. It's treated with reverence, with respect. So they were allowed to also play dice. Right? So Duryodhan, his uncle, his mama, his mother's brother, he had a pair of rigged dice. Right? So Duryodhan, counting on that, he invited Yudhishthir to a gambling match. And he knew Yudhishthir actually had a weakness. He was allowed to gamble, but he didn't know when to stop. Winners know when to stop. So this is also teaching us a lesson, obviously, like, this is an ordinary moral lesson more than a spiritual lesson, that we need to avoid these things, because we just don't know, when we can fall victim to it. You just avoid it point blank, not like, I'll play a little bit, no. So Yudhishthir played and he kept gambling and he kept losing. And it was ridiculous, because the more he lost, the more he was betting. At some point he should have realized that, he's lost everything now, wealth, kingdom, all of that, because they had gotten it back and now they were losing it now. He betted his brothers, he lost. You think he would have stopped there? He betted his wife. And he lost. So technically, actually, by that point, he didn't have a right to bet her, because he had already lost himself. So when they came to fetch her from the room, like, this is so insulting, you don't do this, you don't march into the room of a queen, right? But that's what Duryodhan did. He sent his brother to march into her room. And she couldn't, she refused, but she was no match. They literally dragged her, physically dragged her. Yeah. So they brought her into this audience, and she didn't keep quiet. This is the thing about Draupadi. She's not an ordinary woman, right? She's celestial. She was born from. So she was like, she called them all out, all of them, right, for sitting there and just watching this. There were so many transgressions up to that point, but it was going to get worse. And she was like, you don't have a right to do this. He didn't have a right to do that as well, but all of you are sitting back and tolerating this. And what happened? Duryodhan's like, enough, shut her up, pull off her sari. Right? In the court of Dharma. Beyond ridiculous. So instead of anyone saying anything, they just allowed this brother to start pulling off her sari. And the only person she could call out to was Krishna, because even her husbands had let her down. Even they were sitting there and they couldn't, Yudhishthira let her down. The other brothers couldn't do anything. Bhima started to get up. There's a picture showing, I think, holding him back. He can't. He's been gambled off. So it's not to say that, they could do anything. They're already slaves of Duryodhana. Effectively, that's what Yudhishthira did. So eventually, she, in her prayers, Krishna's not coming. It's because she's holding on with both hands. She's still trying to help herself. When you want God to come, you got to surrender 100%. You got to show him you really want him in your life. If you're telling him you want him, but you kind of got everything sorted your own way, he's not going to come, because he respects your independence that much. Not that he's got better things to do. He respects your independence. That's the deal. That's how it works. That's why we're here doing our own thing and messing things up, because he's not going to interfere with your independence. When you show him that you 100% want him, he will be there. So then she lets go with one hand and she puts one hand up. And then he's still not coming. And she's still holding on, and this guy's still pulling. And then eventually, that wonderful picture, she puts both hands up. She gives up. As soon as she surrenders completely, right, complete sharanam, he's there. He incarnates as her sari. And then they're pulling, and there's no end to that sari. And some histories say that he collapsed from exhaustion from pulling, Others say that Dushashan, that was his name. Others say that he fainted, but either way he gave up. Right? So her modesty was saved, but it wasn't because of all the men sitting there. It was because of Krishna, and that was the point Prabhupada says when Krishna said he had enough of these people. Everything that they had been doing to these Pandavas up to that point, he tolerated because the Pandavas were also tolerating. But when Draupadi was insulted, Krishna said enough. Right? They were all doomed from that point onwards. So the point that we were coming to is that Bhima took a vow at that time. He took a vow that he was going to tear that thigh of Duryodhana. He was going to be Duryodhana's death. Actually, he vowed to kill all those 100 brothers, and he did. He single-handedly killed every one of them. That's how furious he was. But Duryodhana in particular, because he showed his thigh to Draupadi, so many insulting things were happening, for her to sit on his... Right? She was the wife of his elder brother. She was like his mother. And that is, like I said, so many transgressions. So he especially mentions Bhima and Arjuna because they are the biggest threats on that side. Bhima because Duryodhana knew if he's going to die, Prabhupada says he's going to die by Bhima's hands. So he mentions, my mortal threat is there, you better fight hard. Right? And Arjuna is there, the best archer in the world. He's also there. So all these names he's mentioning for a reason. And then he's mentioning other heroic people. Yudhana. Yudhana is a relative of Krishna. Also his other name is Satyaki. Right? He's also a formidable warrior. And he's there. The Yadavas were like the most powerful persons at that time. Right? Their chief is there. And Virata. Virata is he became the father-in-law of Arjuna's son. He's also a powerful king. So you see all these marriage alliances, this is what happened in those days. Right? So you made alliances with strong kingdoms, they would come to your rescue. So Virata he actually wanted his daughter Uttara to marry Arjuna, but because Arjuna in disguise, he had to be in disguise because when the gambling match was lost, then they sent them off to the forest. Duryodhana sent the 5 brothers off to the forest for 12 years. Now how's this? They had to travel in the forest for 12 years. In the 13th year, they had to travel in secret. If they were found out, if anyone found them, they would need to go into exile again for another 12 years. Duryodhana just wanted them out of his sight. He tried to kill them so many times, it didn't work. Now he just wanted them away from the kingdom. So in that 13th year, they had to travel in secret. Okay? So 5 powerful men and Draupadi and one woman.
So why did they get banished to the forest?
Because they lost the gambling match. They lost everything. So the condition of that, sorry, I didn't make that point clear. So when they lost the gambling match, they lost everything, right? They lost their kingdom, Indraprasth, everything they had. So that was the condition of the gambling. So you can imagine now they've got to travel in secret for 1 year. Who's not going to notice 5 powerful men and a woman and Kunti? So very interesting, but everything happens for a reason. Arjuna was once cursed by Urvashi. She's a celestial maiden. So he was there spending time with his celestial father Indra, and Urvashi wanted to get to know him. And he's like, you're like the age of, like, you're one of my, she's almost immortal, right? So she's been living for many, many years. So she's probably, she's been from the times of his ancestors. So he's like, technically you're one of my ancestors, or you're like the level of an aunt or a mother. So she was so upset at that she cursed him that he'd become a eunuch, he'd become a woman. And then his father I think it was his father, kind of adjusted that curse, that he would only have to live it for a year. So guess when he lived that? In this year, right? So it wasn't 5 brothers and Draupadi and their mother traveling around. It was 4 brothers and a eunuch, and God is brilliant, right? And Draupadi and the mother. So when they traveled to this kingdom, the one service that Arjuna could find in this disguise, because in those days the women were not exposed to other men, right? But the men who were castrated, the eunuchs, they could come into the chambers of the women. So therefore he was employed as a dance teacher to Virata's daughter. Right? So he could make use of that. And all the others were employed in different places, stable hand, cook, like this, right? They all just divided themselves in that kingdom. So when they were found out, when the time ended, right, they successfully completed it. So there wasn't another 12 years to go. That's how this war happened, because Duryodhana just couldn't get rid of them anymore. They came back and they demanded, their share of the kingdom, and he wouldn't. He said he would not give them enough land to push a pin in. And that Krishna even went as an envoy. Everybody was trying for peace. When Krishna went as an envoy, he tried to tie Krishna up. Krishna showed his universal form and raised him from there. But this is how determined he was to hold on to the kingdom. Then war became inevitable. It's after so many years. So when that kingdom, when Virata found out that the person who was actually training his daughter was Arjuna, he wanted to marry his daughter to Arjuna because he's a good king and he wants a good alliance. But that's a position, a teacher is like a father. So Arjuna is like, I can't marry you, I can't marry her. Either way, she sat in the wrong lap. She sat in the lap of there's all these things are there, right? There's so much custom and etiquette. She sat in the lap of a daughter-in-law, not the one side, left, right, I forget which one. So he's like, she can marry my son. So she became a very important part of this history because she marries Arjuna's son. Arjuna's son is eventually killed in this battle, but she's pregnant already. And that child is the only survivor of this entire dynasty. Right? The only one to carry this dynasty forward, Parikshit. So he's mentioning Virata as well, because Virata is related by marriage now to Arjuna. He's also going to fight very hard, right? So none of this is good for these guys. And Drupad, of course, your enemy. Right? And then the next verse, the last verse of my section. Drishtaketu Shekitanah Kashi Rajasha Viryavan Purajit Kunti Bhojasha Shaivyasha Narapungavaha. And the translation is, there are also heroic, powerful fighters like Drishtaketu, Chekitana, Kashi Raja, Purajit, Kunti Bhoja, and Shaibya. So these persons are also persons that he's not pleased that have taken the other side. Because Drishtaketu and Chekitana, they're related to Shishupal, who was once his friend, but Krishna has killed his friend. So now these guys they're going according to their family loyalty because Shishupal is a cousin of Krishna. So he was one of the only members of the family who was against Krishna. So now with him out of the way, the other family members are just all for Krishna. So I think Drishtaketu and Chekitana are either the sons of Shishupal and the grandson, but they're related to him. So now he's upset. He's mentioning these names for a reason. He's upset that these people are allying with the force of the Pandavas instead of with him, like was expected if Shishupal was still around. Kashi Raj is also Kashi Raj. They were the Kashi that we know now is Varanasi, but at the time it was two different cities, Varana and Asi. That's what I've heard. So the one side was allied to Duryodhana, and the other side to Krishna. Krishna killed the king of Kashi in his pastimes, the one who was evil. Now the other one has sided with the Pandavas. Right? So he's like, so much support that he feels should have been his, that's all now, on the side of Purajit, Kunti Bhoja. Purajit and Kunti Bhoja are brothers of Kunti. Kunti is the mother of the Pandavas. Okay? So again, people who have a family alliance. All these family alliances means they're going to fight hard for the Pandavas. They're not going to consider, any reason to be soft on the Kauravas, on the 100 evil sons. And Shaibya is also a very powerful fighter. Hero in human society, he's mentioning it in particular. Right? So look at this, he's saying, look at this, look at what's happened, look at all these people, against me. What are we going to do about this? Right? This is what he says. So it's betraying his state of mind. It's betraying his state of mind. That, even though you think he has everything, the fact that he has Bhishma and Drona on his side should be enough. Because Bhishma, although Arjuna is the greatest archer in the world at that time, Bhishma is the greatest fighter, he's the greatest military general, he's the most powerful that probably ever existed. Right? He's fighting on Duryodhana's side, as well as Drona, who is the best teacher of military art. And he's got a bigger force, and he's got, so many crazy people with him. But this must be our takeaway, that even if you have everything, but you don't have God. Yeah. If you don't have the Supreme Lord on your side, you can have everything and you can end up with nothing. That's exactly what happened in this battle. Because sometimes people think, this Bhagavad Gita is all about the instructions and stuff. Why do we need to bother about the backstory? Why are all these people being mentioned? We have to understand there's a reason for everything.
But he underestimated his enemy's power.
Because he underestimated God. He underestimated the power of God. Because at one point when the Pandavas had nothing, before they assembled this military force, what did they have? Krishna, nothing. They were living in the forest. Right? They had nothing but God. And he thought that having the kingdom would mean he had everything. That's why he was holding on to it for dear life, doing everything possible to maintain it, to keep it, to make sure it would never leave his grasp. But yet somehow, and we all know this, we all hear that voice from within, that super soul, that it's not enough. He is sensing it is not enough. By all intents and purposes, he should be sitting back and just allowing this thing to happen so he can get his kingdom once and for all and finish these guys. He's not comfortable. Right? So listen to that voice. And if you have God, you have everything. If you don't have him, you have nothing. That was the end of this battle for him. Nothing. Everything. The whole family, except for that, the 5 Pandavas, Krishna and Ashwatthama, that was 7 people, and that embryo. The whole family was wiped out. Literally nothing. Okay, that's it. Am I still in time? Yay. Okay. Shiva Prabhupada ki.
His Grace Rambhadra Das, Hare Krishna, is a disciple of Hatha Maharaj, Vasaraj Maharaj, Swami.
I was very senior, and he's. I'm hoping to give a lot more classes.
Yes, I may be senior, but my memory lets me down.
Oh, I didn't mean senior like
Junior.
Yeah. No, whenever we read Bhagavad Gita or we listen to discourses on Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture, it is nice for us to link it to our present day life. And I just want to tell you, I won't take much of your time, I just want to tell you a small story that I witnessed, and that is why it remained in my mind, in my heart. It's imprinted, and it is connected to the Gita as well. There was this one lady that hated her sister-in-law very, very much. So much so that she told her on her face, "You are going to die. You are going to suffer and die." We did take this very seriously. Her sister-in-law, to the best of our knowledge, was a very nice person. But it so happened that she died in hospital, and before she died in hospital, we went to see her. And she had lost her mind. She didn't know who she was, where she was, what her name, connections. She knew nothing. And when we went to the hospital a couple of times, all she did was roll on the bed over and over again. And then finally she passed away. Now I'm not saying that because this particular lady cursed her, this happened. But what I'm trying to say is that the hatred that existed between this lady and her sister-in-law was so intense that she actually wanted this thing to happen to her. She also said, "I want to see you suffer, and I will see that this happens to you." Now similarly, if you take the Kauravas, their hatred for the Pandavas was so intense that they didn't even allow them to take 1 inch of land. And these things happen all the time in our lives. Even now at this very moment, things are happening in the world that are based on similar issues. But we don't have time to discuss that. Let me go on to text 6. Yeah, this question of hatred. You know, we are on a spiritual journey. We cannot allow this question of hatred to dwell in our hearts. There may be people that did us wrong. We may have done wrong to them, but we need to forget this, because if we keep this in our hearts, in our minds, then our spiritual journey will be derailed. As it is, Krishna has been so kind to us. He has enabled us to follow his teachings. He has brought all of us together here. And we cannot afford to be derailed. So we need to purify our hearts, to purify our senses, so that we are good enough to reach Golaka, Vrindavan. Chapter 6. I'll read the Sanskrit first. Yudamanyus cha vikranta utam aujas cha virayavan Subhadro druprayadis cha sarva eva maharata. They are the mighty Yudamanyu, the very powerful Uttamoja, the son of Subhadra, and the sons of Draupadi. All these warriors are great chariot fighters. Yes. Now, if you look at the son of Subhadra now, we must remember that Subhadra was the sister of Krishna. If I get my facts wrong, please correct me. Subhadra was the sister of Krishna, and Draupadi was the wife of the Pandavas. Remember, there were 5 Pandava brothers, and they had one wife. Now, this may sound strange to us, but there is a story behind it. And yes, these were great fighters, and you can see that what's his name? Dhritarashtra, yeah. Not Dhritarashtra, his son's name? Duryodhana. Now, Duryodhana was frightened of these people. He was intimidated by these people, because these people were such great warriors. And that is what he is saying in this verse. Text 7. Asmakam tu vasista ye tan niboda divijotma nayaka mama sainasya samjanratam tan bravimite. But for your information, O best of the Brahmanas, now Dronacharya was the commander of the army of Duryodhana, and so he is addressing Dronacharya. He was a Brahmin. O best of the Brahmanas, let me tell you about the captains who are especially qualified to lead my military force. So Duryodhana is talking about the big names in his army, the people that are going to fight on behalf of the Kauravas. They are personalities like you, meaning Dronacharya, Bhisma, Karna, Kripa, Asvatthama, Vikarna, and the son of Somdatta called Burisrava, who are always victorious in battle. So he was also thinking about the people, the big names in his army, and thinking about these big names that are on his side gives him a lot of courage, a lot of confidence. Purport. Duryodhana mentions the exceptional heroes in the battle, all of whom are ever victorious. Vikarna is a brother of Duryodhana. Asvatthama is the son of Dronacharya. And Somadatti or Burisrava is the son of the king of the barley castes. Karna is the half-brother of Arjuna, as he was born of Kunti before her marriage to King Pandu. Remember, Kunti is the mother of Arjuna, but before that she was married to someone else, and Arjuna was born. But now she is
They sings, the sings of Durvasa. And
Durvasa Muni.
yeah,
Yes.
and she got that benediction from the sun god. That was
Yeah,
that's
so
Indra come from the sun god.
Kripacharya's twin sister married Dronacharya. So you can see here now that these people that are on his side. He's trying to say how good they are, how powerful they are. Then we go to text 9. Anye cha bahava sura mad arte tyakta jivita nana sastra praharana sarve yuddha visarada. There are many other heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. All of them are well equipped with different kinds of weapons, and all are experienced in military science. Now here, what's his name again?
Duryodhana.
Duryodhana is saying that these people that are fighting on our behalf are so powerful, and yet they are willing to lay their lives for us, to lay down their lives for us, which means that they are already on the verge of losing the war. That is the message that we get from this statement. Purport, as far as the others are concerned, like Jayadratha, Kritavarma, and Salya, all are determined to lay down their lives for Duryodhana's sake. In other words, it is already concluded that all of them would die in the battle of Kurukshetra for joining the party of the sinful Duryodhana. Now, because these people are joining the party of Duryodhana, and Duryodhana is regarded as an evil person, and therefore it is taken for granted that they will lose the war. Yet Duryodhana is insistent that they will win. Duryodhana was, of course, confident of his victory on account of the above-mentioned combined strength of his friends. Text 10. Aparyaptam tad asmakam palam bhishma virasitam bhisma viraksitam paryaptam tav idam itesam balam bhima virasitam. Our strength is immeasurable, and we are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhisma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas, carefully protected by Bhima, is limited. Purport: herein an estimation of comparative strength is made by Duryodhana. He thinks that the strength of his armed forces is immeasurable, being specifically protected by the most experienced general, grandfather Bhisma. On the other hand, the forces of the Pandavas are limited, being protected by a less experienced general, Bhima, who is like a fig in the presence of Bhisma. Duryodhana was always envious of Bhima because he knew perfectly well that should he die at all, he would only be killed by Bhima. But at the same time, he was confident of his victory on account of the presence of Bhisma, who was a far superior general. His conclusion that he would come out of the battle victorious was well ascertained. So what Duryodhana is doing, he is comparing the warriors in his army to that of the Pandavas. And although he said earlier on that if he was going to be killed, he would be killed by Bhima. So he was particularly afraid of Bhima because he felt that nobody else could kill him, only Bhima could kill him. So, and then this is all leading up to the war. And what we are looking at the present moment is the things that are going on in Duryodhana's mind. He is comparing his army to that of the Pandavas, and sometimes he feels that those in his army are very powerful. At other times he feels that the opposition also has very renowned warriors. So let's see what happens in the following chapters. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.